All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We got a great one for you as always. Big news coming from the House Democratic Caucus as of late, and boy, am I raring to go into it. The story all starts at the Netroots Nation Conference, where something actually pretty remarkable happened for the first time in a long time. Pramila Jayapal called Israel a racist state. That was just a few days ago. We'll take bets up until we reveal the answer. Has she had to retract it yet, or has she stuck with it? So, take two guesses to see how long it took her to retract it. Also, we will take a look at some of the backlash from other folks surrounding some of those comments. Also, the Biden final order on the John F. Kennedy assassination files is still out. And apparently, some are not that satisfied. We'll take a look at what Biden did with regards to the JFK assassinations. Also, cluster bombs are heading, civilian killing cluster bombs, I might add, are heading to Ukraine. And with that, we see the resurgence of some sort of actually progressive criticism of the Ukraine war, not just ceding it to the right and crazies like RFK Jr. Also, we're going to end today on an amazing John Schwartz column. Today's class war is the 1% versus the people just below them. Interesting. We'll get into it. It's going to be a great show. Welcome to Newsflash. Okay, so we, maybe tell I'm a little bit more amped up for this story because it is just coming in. It's pretty hot off the presses as of now. And it's a pretty remarkable situation. So we had Pramila Jayapal at this conference over the weekend. She is the House Democratic Progressive Caucus leader. So she's supposed to be leading the left wing of the House Democratic Caucus. The Progressive Caucus used to be pretty much just anyone who wants can join type of situation. It's been brought down. It's been pared down a little bit to size. But it has been seen some with Pramila Jayapal and Ro Khanna at the helm. We've seen concession after concession to Joe Biden, and just weakness all around from the progressives. Things, going back to that infrastructure bill in the beginning of Biden's presidency. And I mean, there hasn't really been any other major legislative priorities, but those are some pretty big ones, probably the only major ones of Biden's presidency, at least in the first term, that he's going to get. And it is going to be disastrous. It was disastrous, frankly, the way they handled them. They just failed on every count. They ceded all the leverage to Joe Manchin, and they let some of the worst stuff pass, taking Biden's word that he could, just finagle Manchin on board when he clearly couldn't, and completely failed to do so. So that brings us to the Netroots Nation Conference, which is essentially the CPAC for the Democrats. It's pretty much party line Democratic stuff. A lot of, just boring, standard, rote, Democratic, bullcrap. So it's nothing really to be excited for. But that's why my eyebrows were certainly raised over the weekend. When I wasn't really following politics, it was kind of a way over the weekend. We're recording this here on Sunday night. I'm back here following some of the news, and it has been a really, really remarkable story because I saw Pramila Jayapal come out and say this at the Netroots Nation Conference after she was being disrupted by some Palestinian activists. Her speech was being disrupted. And just there's so many layers to this. I really hope I can do a good job of summing them up. So this is the inciting incident here at the Netroots Nation Conference. You normally a standard, incredibly boring Democrat conference where they just say, isn't Trump bad? Aren't the Republicans bad? That type of thing. Nothing too crazy going on there. It's not like, it's the font of policy ideas and planning for the future. And, it's not exactly a vibrant place, Netroots Nation. But nevertheless, this happened in a pretty remarkable incident because the Palestinian activists came in and injected some vibrancy into it. Let's take a look. Again, so this is Pramila Jayapal on a panel with what looks like some other Democratic House members as the Palestinian activists come into the room.
I'll just leave. Maybe I should just walk off.
Guys, can I say something? Can I say something as somebody that's been
in the streets and
Okay, first of all, it's just outrageous. Pramila Jayapal was essentially unknown until whatever she got to the helm of the Progressive Caucus and tried to pass herself off as a squad member. And in that time, she's just done nothing but concede to Biden. Where are her big wins? Where are her, if you look at, for example, another top politician out of Washington, another big left-wing politician out of Washington, Seattle specifically, Shama Sawant works with a fraction in Seattle, a city councilwoman who, in my opinion, stupidly is leaving to, do whatever she's doing. But she got 10 times more done in such a short period of time than Pramila Jayapal could ever begin to conceptualize to accomplish. And she has the gall to come out. And honestly, sometimes the people who are, closest to the quote unquote left wing of the party have to be the most galling, have to have the most audacity to tell the base, just to give the base the middle finger here. And that's exactly what's going on. Pramila Jayapal giving the base, saying, oh, as someone who's been on the streets, let me educate you and essentially tell you to shut the fuck up. Let's see what she has to say.
Has participated in a lot of demonstrations. I want you to know.
Yeah, the Women's March.
We have been fighting to make it clear that
That's
Israel is a racist state, that the Palestinian people deserve self-determination and autonomy, that the dream of a two-state solution is slipping away from us, that it does not even feel possible. It does not even feel possible.
So yeah, frankly, that is a remarkable statement, though, from Pramila Jayapal. It was when I heard it, my eyes kind of popped out of my head, like, "Whoa, Pramila Jayapal with the spine out of nowhere," and she's like, because that is something that like 2 or 3 people, not even the full fucking squad, would say that Israel is a racist state, on the backs of it, which it explicitly is. All you can do is listen to our Hidden History episode about the Nakba and talk about, just use your brain for 2 seconds to realize that the basis of success for the Israeli state is to exclude and kick out Palestinian residents, just in the same way that the basis for success for the American state was to kick out, kill, and exclude the Native Americans from society and destroy their society to put an Jewish supremacist Jewish ethno-state in place. That is a racist state. Just as by that same token, again, you could call America a racist state. It was it's been a lot. We've worked to include more people in it, but Israel at this point in time hasn't. They're a little bit earlier in their stage of development, but it is a settler colonial project that. Like as simple as that, clear as day, and but for coming out of the House Democratic Caucus, it's pretty remarkable here. It really, really is. So this is kind of a crazy situation. So I just kind of popped out of my head when I saw this over the weekend. Let's take a listen to the last few seconds.
And I want you to know that while you may have arguments with whether or not some of us on stage are fighting hard enough, I do want you to know that there is an organized opposition on the other side, and it isn't the people that are on this stage.
So here it is. So it's a little bit of a snide remark to say, we're the good guys. We're fighting for you here. It's a classic kind of paternalistic type of mindset there coming from Pramila Jayapal at the end and saying, oh, yeah, there's an organized opposition. And you may have some disagreements about how hard we're fighting. But again, we are the good guys. Don't question us. Don't really, cast aspersions on our willingness to support Israel. But anyway, Israel's a racist state. So it was a really quite a remarkable moment there. So again, this group of Jewish House Democrats, probably the same ones that did the letter against Ilhan Omar and the other letter against Ilhan Omar and all that stuff, they apparently immediately began circulating the letter. There's been some outrage. I think there was a leadership statement from Akeem Jeffries talking about this, saying, essentially, we disagree with the Netanyahu government, but Israel is not a racist state. And then what do we see? Pramila Jayapal statement just 4 hours ago, writing, at a conference, I attempted to defuse a tense situation during a panel where fellow members of Congress were being protested. Words do matter, and so it's important. Oh, okay, by the way, oh no, fellow members of Congress being protested? Like, that's the worst possible, you have to go run and hide. Like, this is horrific. Again, it's just the rage that these people have, because some people say, oh, disrupting a conference is not that effective, getting people's faces not, it's just makes you look like an asshole. Well, clearly, this is a case where it made some actual difference because it put people on the record. It got Pramila Jayapal to say something. Who knows what the fuck she actually believes, but she immediately turned back on it. So, at first it was like, wow, she's headed to racist state, but here she goes. Words do matter, and so it's important that I clarify my statement. I do not believe the idea of Israel as a nation is racist. I do, however, believe that Netanyahu's extreme right-wing government has engaged in discriminatory and outright racist policies, and that there are extreme racists driving that policy within the leadership of the current government. So again, just the current government that's the problem. Again, so just get out of the Yair Lapid bombing Israel just the same, condoning settlement or bombing Palestinians just the same, condoning settlement just the same, completely fine. But because it's Netanyahu and he's maybe he's got Itamar Ben-Gvir in there, he's talking about how gays are bad too. When we talk about gays getting bad, that's a real problem. So again, the House Democrats essentially aligning themselves with the absolute marks, rubes, and idiots on the streets of Israel, waving the Israeli flag and getting subsequently water cannoned by their own state that they claim to love so much. It's just really, really remarkable stuff. And it shows you, again, the Palestinian protesters who came in and waved the Palestinian flag in their face and forced Pramila Jayapal to get on the record there. They were absolutely right. These people, they were right to make that claim. It looked a little bit remarkable from Pramila Jayapal at the time, but, it was very, very clear that they do not have the wherewithal to withstand this opposition. I mean, honestly, I would not be surprised if Pramila Jayapal believes this statement in actuality. She says, I've always worked towards a two-state solution that allows both Israelis and Palestinians to live freely, safely, and with self-determination alongside each other, and that is still what I'm absolutely committed to. So it's not anything, too encouraging, at all, whatsoever. So we take a look at some more of the backlash here, and let's take a look at some of the leadership conference. So Jayapal, again, she walked back her statement saying words do matter, and so it's important that I clarify my statement again. I do not believe that Israel as a nation is racist. Again, Josh Gottheimer, Debbie Wasserman Schultz were on the other side of the letter. Brad Schneider, all those people, same people that instantly, by the way, also on the very right wing of the Democratic caucus, by the way, were knives out for Ilhan Omar and, AOC and all those other people and Rashid Tlaib who dared to stick their heads out of the line. And, DMFI have really crushed Justice Democrats over the years in terms of the last few years in terms of spending and things like that. There's no real kind of, and it hasn't really been around Israeli policy. If anything, it's just been around the fact that they say, oh, we're anti-Israel, but then they'll challenge left-wing candidates by running ads completely unrelated to that. I think that's definitely something that needs to be analyzed more on a strategic basis. But it is no excuse to kowtow in an absolutely pathetic way, and very, very smugly, they come back. So a copy of which was obtained by Axios, this draft letter by the Zionist Democratic Caucus here. They say, today, U.S. representatives released the following statement regarding Pramila Jayapal. Comments on Israel, our most important ally in the Middle East. We are deeply concerned about Representative Pramila Jayapal's unacceptable comments about our historic democratic ally, Israel, and we appreciate her retraction. Israel remains the only vibrant, progressive, and inclusive democracy in the region. Arab parties serve in the Knesset. Women serve at the highest levels of the military. And the country remains an oasis for LGBTQ people in a region hostile towards the community. Pluralism flourishes in Israel. Again, pluralism unless you're... pluralism for all the Jews. Democracy for all the Jews. That is the point of Israel, is that Jews are given rights and Arabs are explicitly not. This bullshit about, there's Arab parties, serving in the Knesset. That is a very much a token type of situation that does not in any way reflect the actual realities on the ground, and general rights of the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and even inside of Israel. As they continue to get their houses ransacked and their lives harassed. Just ask Mohammed al-Kurd, who is probably one of the best situations you can be as a Palestinian in Israel. His family lives in occupied East Jerusalem. He's a Palestinian activist, spoke really eloquently about this stuff. And he was one of the first people to come out and say, really, in a quite incredible way, to shift the conversation on this. And he's not going to tell you, he's like, he's not out there being like, oh, I'm so thankful there's Arab parties serving in the Knesset. It's an absolute joke. It's an absolute joke, in a complete way. So they end up by saying, we will never allow anti-Zionist forces that embolden anti-Semitism, there we go, to, choice word here as well, hijack the Democratic Party and country. So very, bile-filled statement there by the, Zionist voices in the party. The letter is again authored by Josh Gottheimer, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Greg Landsman, Brad Schneider, Dean Phillips, Jared Moskowitz, and Kathy Manning. All some lawmakers are Jewish and are moderates. The letter is still being circulated for signatures. Meanwhile, Akeem Jeffries, Catherine Clark, and Pete Aguilar put out a statement saying Israel is not a racist state as well. So far, Omar, Bowman, and Ocasio-Cortez are boycotting the speech. And I love this too. Asked by CNN if she's attending the speech, Jayapal reportedly said, I don't think I am, but I haven't fully decided. I will not be surprised if she ends up going. Let's be honest. Let's be real. That's who she is. She, likes to, she was almost tricked into taking a stand there, but now really has immediately kind of come to terms and been like, it was gotten herself, back to normal, back to kind of a comfort zone of, just kowtowing to power. So she's going to be in there. She's going to be clapping along to Herzog's statements when the president of Israel, Herzog, speaks later this week to a joint session in Congress. Her co-leader of the Progressive Caucus, Representative Ro Khanna, told Axios, I met him when I was in Israel. He's actually much more moderate and liberal, so I am going. Again, it's just absolutely failing to miss. It's not about the guy; it's about the state that he represents. Okay, so and again, you look back, I'm sure you can find some pretty really horrific things that he said, because the whole point about Israel is to say, oh, we're so gay friendly, we're the only democracy in the Middle East, we make the desert bloom, all that yada 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 bullcrap. They speak towards the Americans. Meanwhile, they turn around and say, we're anti-gay. We're supporting settlements. We're raiding the Jenin refugee camp, blowing up civilians left and right, and not in any way taking steps toward peace, because we know the United States will never allow it. So it's a really just short sight, and just really why I believe Ro Khanna, he's trying to front like he wants to run for president. He probably, I would say, has the political acuity of a 5-year-old. Like, he's just not someone who understands a lot of what's going on around him. He doesn't know who his friends are. He doesn't know who his enemies are, and is just someone who I kind of see as a guy who is a little fish in a pool full of sharks, who doesn't really know where he is. Let's just put it that way. And then again, to top it all off, just as we got ready to go on the air, Mondir Jones, who is trying to run for Congress as in my home district as a so-called squad member, or a squad adjacent member, I guess you could say. He says, I'm glad Rep. Jayapal issued a statement saying she does not believe Israel is a racist state. Let me also say I'm glad President Herzog is speaking to Congress, and I would absolutely be attending if I were in the House. I'm proud of my pro-Israel record in Congress. Again, so I know I said a few weeks ago I'm going to be voting for him. I would consider voting for him. Well, not anymore. It really is pretty depressing time to be a pro-Palestinian person. or just especially a Palestinian person. You have no friends in the house, even the fakest friends are some of the most vicious, as it turns out. So again, pretty disappointing stuff all around. But again, just someone who, when it comes down to it, the Palestinian activist who disrupted that, that speech were absolutely right. She is somebody who, they knew who they were dealing with. Just weak people, fake people who don't have the courage of their convictions. And she's right. There is one less opposition. These people are just the tip of the spear. Behind them, AIPAC, DMFI, all that stuff. Millions of dollars to go again in these congressional reelection campaigns. But, you're not going to get anywhere if you don't have any kind of organization on the other side. And that is something that Pramila Jayapal has not even attempted to do. And neither has pretty much anyone else in Congress. So it's a pretty pathetic situation, to say the least. And I am, I have to say, I was shocked, but really when it came down to it, when we saw what the situation turned out to be, I was not surprised. So with that being said, we will move on to our next story in just a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and supporting Newsflash. We now have a brand new way for you to be heard if you want, whether a text message or a audio message. Please, no video messages. I really just do not think that's necessary. We have a new feedback box open for you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially open. SWRN702@gmail.com. Send a text message, send a voice message of no more than 30 seconds via the voice memos function. Either of those two options, and we will 100%, not going to find this guarantee anywhere else. We're going to play it on the show, listen to what you have to say, and it literally could be about anything. Well, if it's inappropriate, we won't play it, but it could be about anything. Thank you so much. This is my thank you to all the listeners who have stuck out with us and want to have their own voice in the show. SWRN702@gmail.com is the address. All right, so pretty interesting situation going on with Joe Biden, and this New York Times article gets into it. On June 22nd, 1962, an intelligence official drafted a memo summarizing a letter intercepted between Lee Harvey Oswald and his mother. The memo was made public long ago, but for 60 years, the name of the letter opener was kept secret. Now it can finally be told. According to an unredacted copy of the memo released by the recently by the government. So this memo that was intercepted by Lee Harvey Oswald and so this memo summarizing the letter between Lee Harvey Oswald and his mother was intercepted. A memo was written about the letter. The memo was made public, but for 60 years the name of the letter opener was kept secret. Now it can finally be told. According to an unredacted copy of the memo released recently by the government, the official who intercepted Oswald's mail for the CIA in the months before President Kennedy was assassinated was named Reuben Efron. And that means what exactly? A tantalizing clue to unraveling a complicated conspiracy the government has sought to cover up for decades. Additional proof the CIA knew more about Oswald than it initially acknowledged, or a minor detail withheld all this time because of bureaucratic imperatives irrelevant to the question of whether Oswald was a lone gunman on that fateful day. Personally, I haven't really talked about this too much, but I am not someone who believes the lone gunman theory. Beyond that, I think it really, could be anyone's guess as to what happened. I certainly think it's more likely than not the CIA at least knew to some pretty detailed extent, let's just say, about what Lee Harvey Oswald had in mind, or they knew of him, they knew what he was trying to do, possibly. Again, can't really say for sure. But the mystery of Reuben Efron, who has been dead for 3 decades, may never be resolved to the satisfaction of those dedicated to studying the assassination. But 30 years after Congress ordered that papers related to the killing be made public, with limited exceptions, President Biden has declared that he has made his final certification of the files to be released, even though 4,684 documents remain withheld in whole or in part. Going forward, agencies will decide any future disclosures that may be warranted by the passage of time. Again, my personal thing with this is, release all of them. We are at a point where, even if, the worst conspiracy theories of this are true, and it was a, CIA targeted assassination to take down Kennedy because of his refusal to play along with the, worst aspects of the Cold War and the most anti-communist, kind of tendencies. Well, I think it's really clear that moment in time is over. The Cold War long gone. The elite control over American foreign policy has been pretty firmly enshrined at this point. So essentially what I'm saying is I don't think they have that much to worry about. So, with that being said, I do not see why it's that big a deal to, just open it up, see what's going on. I don't think it's going to, unless there's something really bad in there, I don't get the case for holding this back to a certain degree. Even if, it does kind of point to that, I think, honestly, what are people going to do? Start a revolution, overthrow the state, It's all powerful. Like, the state has entrenched itself so firmly, especially the national security, deep state, whatever you want to call it, that it's really hard to say, oh no, this may destabilize things, especially because it was 60 years ago at this point, more. I think actually we're coming up on, am I doing that wrong? We're coming up on the 60th anniversary this November, so pretty exciting. Anyway, the president's certification issued at 6:36 p.m. on Friday, not long before the 4th of July holiday weekend, when it would not draw much attention, has frustrated researchers and historians still focused on the most sensational American murder of the 20th century. But they suffered a setback on Friday when a federal judge refused to block Biden's order. Jefferson Morley, the editor of JFK Facts and the author of several books on the CIA, said the blatant identification of Efron indicated that intelligence agencies still had something to keep from the American public. If they hid this guy's name for 61 years and they're still hiding other stuff, I would say they're still hiding sources and methods around Oswald. Morley said, why else did that name remain secret for 61 years? The CIA is trying to slam the door now, and Biden's gone along with this. From the other side of the spectrum, Gerald Posner, the author of Case Closed, a 1993 book concluding that Oswald killed Kennedy on his own, said he doubted there was a smoking gun in the remaining files. So again, it's not a surprising thing to say. While Morley and him diverge on the historical evidence, Posner agreed that Biden's decision was an abrogation of responsibility under the 1992 law mandating release of the documents. Trust in the government being what it is, he said the public will never accept official reassurances. There is no stunning revelation in the paper. I don't think it's in there, but you only know when you have all the files available. So, again, when it comes down to it, why not just release the files? Even if Gerald Posner, the most down the line person on this, straight up mainstream lone gunman, Jack Ruby was acting on his own too, sure. I don't think you're going to, come down the line on this and say, with him, even Gerald Posner coming out and saying this, just saying, why not just release it all if there's nothing in there? And he really probably believes that there's nothing in there. Why not just release it all? Prove the haters wrong and just be done with it. And the logical conclusion will lead you to believe maybe there's something in there they don't not quite want out. It may not be, the overall worst possible thing. It may not be, for example, I don't know, George H.W. Bush was actually the one in the book depository or something like that. It's probably not that, but it's probably something, logic I think would indicate something that is not, not something that would flatter the CIA. Anyway, let's go on to our next story. A column here in Jacobin by Branko Marcetic. Last two were from the New York Times and Axios. But anyway, last October, dozens of House progressives were slapped down by the U.S. foreign policy establishment for floating, in the words of one congressional staffer, the softest trial balloon about diplomacy. Oh my God, I remember that. Yeah, that was that letter that was like, we should probably start here for diplomacy in Ukraine. People freaked out. This episode seemed to slam shut the door on even the mildest progressive dissent from the White House policy on the war, with 9 months that followed defined largely by lockstep Democratic support for the administration's wishes, with only a relatively small cohort of Republicans defying the president in the form of voting against further military aid. But Joe Biden's decision earlier this month to approve the transfer of cluster munitions for Ukrainian forces may have opened that door a crack. Last night, a failed 147 to 276 vote to ban the provision of the notoriously child-maiming weapons. 49 Democrats and 98 Republicans voted for an amendment to end that. To that end, the notoriously child-maiming weapons Marcia Teach is talking about here are the cluster munitions that Biden's sending over. 49 Democrats and 98 Republicans voted for an amendment that was, again, brought out by Marjorie Taylor Greene, of all people. Despite roughly 2-1 margin against Greene's measure, the vote marks one of the most significant congressional challenges to Biden's administration's approach to the war since the Russian invasion last February, and is certainly the most substantial episode of progressive dissent from the White House on this matter. The vote is doubly significant given the underhanded maneuvering that took place to kill its backing. The original National Defense Authorization Act amendment to block the White House cluster munitions transfer, one that Biden is embarking on using a loophole to get around an unambiguous legal ban on sending deadly civilian killing shells. Again, don't let anyone tell you that sending cluster munitions is not illegal, not just internationally, but also here in the United States. So Biden's using a loophole here. That was put forward by 2 Democrats, Rep. Sarah Jacobs and Ilhan Omar. So this original amendment, was put forward by Sarah Jacobs and Ilhan Omar, and was accompanied by a letter from them and 17 other House Democrats renouncing the move. Eric Sperling, Executive Director of Just Foreign Policy, who has been working on drumming up support for halting the cluster munitions transfer, estimated that there would have been considerable bipartisan support for the amendment had it gone to the floor. They got very nervous. Sperling said it was looking extremely likely that we could pass this as evidence. Sperling points to recent statements from the Senate, with Bernie Sanders alluding to a companion effort in the upper chamber to ban the weapons. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois vowing to work very hard to oppose the Jacobs Amendment if it passed in the House. So the amendment drew bipartisan support, with Donald Trump-aligned Matt Gaetz, who's shown an appetite for working with progressives on anti-war legislation in the past, co-sponsoring the amendment. The cross-ideological backing reflected an unusual amount of opposition to Biden's announcement, which has been criticized by human rights groups and was met with polite non-support from even close U.S. allies like the UK and Germany, probably the 2 most, directly, kind of in contact countries the United States has been working on with the most about when it comes to this war. From the point of view of lawmakers eager to litter eastern Ukraine with cluster bomblets, Greene's amendment had 2 advantages. It applied only to a cluster munitions transfer in Ukraine, turning the vote into a referendum on the war, which is enthusiastically backed by Democratic voters. And it was attached to the politically toxic Greene, an unpopular, formerly QAnon-supporting Republican congressman who was just as hated by liberals, and was just booted from the stridently right-wing Freedom Caucus. As a result, a number of Democrats who had expressed discomfort and even outright opposition to Biden's move effectively voted to uphold it, including Jacobs, the original sponsor of the Democratic anti-cluster munitions amendment, who simply chose not to vote on Thursday, as well as 3 other signers of the House Progressive Caucus, or House Progressive letter against the weapons: Sheila Serfilius McCormick of Florida, Hank Johnson of Georgia, and Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas, who voted present. Other Democrats who had spoke out against the White House's move but failed to follow through last night included Representative Jason Crow, an unexploded ordnance and demining caucus co-chair, Chrissy, I didn't know that was a thing, Chrissy Houlihan, said, who once said about it, victory cannot come at the expense of our American values and thus democracy itself. Yet, despite political risks and major pressure to vote against the Green Amendment, including a rhetorical upping of the ante from Secretary of State Tony Blinken, who claimed Ukraine would be left defenseless if munitions were blocked, many progressives and others stuck to their guns. And when it comes to this, it's like this is really kind of the typical, like this is why, in one word, liberals cannot be trusted. And they kind of suck. I mean, like this is something they come out just days before they turn against it, just to say let's stop Joe Biden from providing civilian killing bombs to the Ukrainians, and scatter little bomblets all across the Ukrainian-Russian border for many years to come that could kill civilians and especially children. And then what does it take? All it takes is Marjorie Taylor Greene to put up an amendment there, and all of a sudden they get cold feet. It shows like the principles, like these people, they just do not understand. Like the definition of principles, they just don't. Because principles are, you're supposed to stick to your guns. You're supposed to support it, no matter who is signing on. No matter who is speaking to it, if it still accomplishes the same goal. And maybe it was a referendum on Ukraine or whatever, but I'm willing to bet a lot more, way more likely than not, it was Blinken and probably a lot of internal pressure from the people in the White House coming out and saying let's not look bad on this. They got, someone like Sarah Jacobs, who is a pretty, down the line kind of standard Democrat most of the time, to come out and say, you know what, we're just going to let this through. Marjorie Taylor Greene's a little iffy. But they, again, essentially voted to uphold it. In the end, every member of the squad and others associated with the cohort of young socialists and progressives, including longtime members Omar AOC and Rashid Tlaib, as well as recently elected figures like Summer Lee and Maxwell Frost, as well as Becca Balint of Vermont, held the line despite the shenanigans. So Barbara Lee, a longtime congressional critic of U.S. foreign policy and an outspoken opponent of cluster munitions transfer, also voted for the amendment, as did Ro Khanna, one of the signers and vocal defenders of Progressive's pro-diplomacy letter last year, who said that thousands of kids will die because of cluster bombs, and that he voted based on the issue, not the author. Again, I know we just criticized Ro Khanna there, but that's literally all it takes. I'm talking about the issue, not the author. I don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's crazy, all that kind of stuff. But still, I don't want kids to die in Ukraine, just because I don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm putting the lives of civilians in Ukraine above my dislike for Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's not that hard. And it shows you, again, one of the big weaknesses, to say the least, when it comes to liberals. All right. Now to our next and final story here today. It's a little column by John Schwartz. He writes, what does Elon Musk firing 6,500 people at Twitter have to do with the Writers Guild of America and actors in SAG-AFTRA going on strike? How is Meta, axing 21,000 employees, connected to more and more doctors wondering if they have to unionize? And how is this all related to Donald Trump taking a government map of Hurricane Dorian's projected path in 2020 and scrawling on it with a Sharpie? The answer is that America's owners have opened a new front in their battle against everyone else, declaring war on the class of technocrats who were once their greatest allies. In Adam Smith's famed 1776 disquisition on economics, The Wealth of Nations, he ponders the behavior of the great proprietors of feudalism. They own the most valuable property available, i.e. land, and with their income from this property supported a class of attendants and retainers, and below them a class of tenants of the land. But the proprietors gradually lost taste for this. They eventually wished to consume the whole surplus produce of their lands without sharing it either with tenants or retainers. All for ourselves and nothing for other people seems in every age of the world to have been the vile maxim of the masters of mankind. The Wealth of Nations is so full of this ferocious criticism of the psychology of the powerful, it's peculiar how today's powerful champion the book so frequently. There was even a vogue among male members of the Reagan administration for wearing ties with literal pictures of Adam Smith. Ugh, that is just awful. The most likely explanation here is that America's top apparatchiks don't waste time reading that kind of stuff. And I'm honestly probably right when it comes to that. In any case, Smith's perspective was generally correct, both about the way societies can develop three different tiers and the overall view of the people at the top of them. The vile maxim, all for ourselves and nothing for other people, seems to be reaching a level of virulence Americans have not experienced in living memory. Like feudal England, America has, roughly speaking, three classes. At the top are today's great proprietors. The basis of their wealth is no longer mainly held in land, but in direct ownership of their own businesses, plus financial institutions, including corporate stocks and bonds. The top 1% owns over half of U.S. corporate stocks. The people just below them are no longer attendants and retainers, but technocrats, the PMC. Talking about doctors, lawyers, scientists, computer programmers, and engineers. Journalists are also technically among technocrats, but among the weakest of the group. The rest of the top 10%, i.e. the 9%, almost all the rest of the U.S. corporate stock. This is kind of the top 10% here. That's what they're talking about. Then there's everyone else. No longer tenant farmers, but they still have to get up every day and clock in at Home Depot, Walgreens, and Chipotle to cultivate the possession of the great proprietors. This working class has the least leverage and fewest options. In retrospect, it's clear America's masters of mankind were shocked enough by World War II to dial the vile maxim back. As President FDR said in his 1944 State of the Union address, necessitous men are not free men. People who are hungry, people who are out of a job, are the stuff of which dictatorships are made. Again, someone who finally understands what's going on here. Even if you're the son of a national Citibank executive destined to follow in your father's executive footsteps, you would be able to hear Roosevelt's message after spending time face down in the mud on Okinawa, covered in your platoon mate's viscera. Because there was at least more of also a spirit of kind of national solidarity at the time. But anyway. Thus, the two great proprietors willing to share quite a bit with the bottom two classes for a while. During 3 decades after the war, median wages went up hand in hand with productivity. That is, as America overall got richer, so did regular people. But by the 1970s, the great proprietors had gotten tired of this arrangement. The generation with direct adult experience of how destabilized societies can explode into a worldwide slaughterhouse was retiring and dying. So the masters of mankind decided to alter the deal vis-a-vis the working class. This was a gargantuan success. It's amazing that they pulled it off without any kind of bloodshed. If the minimum wage had continued to go up with productivity, it would not be $7.25, but about $25 an hour. A recent RAND study found that if the U.S. would remain as equitable as it was in 1975 for the next 43 years through 2018, the bottom 90% of America would have earned an extra $47 trillion. Instead, all that money flowed to the top. Meanwhile, the technocratic class watched this process with equanimity. Technocrats generally identified upward with and allied themselves with the great proprietors against everyone else. There had been a proprietor technocrat peace for a long, long time, with the technocrats having a power to garner a slice of society's good things for themselves. This included not just money, but also the prestige and control over their working lives, even as they served in junior partners in the coalition. The explosion of new wealth in Silicon Valley has also made the boundaries of the two classes enticingly fuzzy. Bill Gates is the son of Bill Gates Sr., who was a prominent corporate lawyer in Seattle. Billionaire Sean Parker, the founder of Napster and the first president of Facebook, is the son of an oceanographer in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. But just as America's masters of mankind got tired of sharing with the U.S. working class, they've now become fatigued with their deal with the technocrats. It's difficult to measure or define this. Like Galadriel said at the start of the Lord of the Rings movies, you have to feel it in the water and smell it in the air. I hope that Galadriel was good. But anyway, something has clearly changed in the psychology of the people at the top of America. And I was just saying this, I feel like this morning, it's just like to keep capitalism going and to keep their, quality of life going, the top 1%, to keep this whole shebang going on for a little bit longer. All they would have to do is just throw everyday people, throw the technocratic class, throw anyone, just a little bit of a bone. Just give them just a little something of it, just to calm them down just a little bit. It really would not be that hard, and they would still have tons and tons of wealth left over. But they are proving more and more fundamentally incapable of doing that. is partly about money, but this vile maxim is about everything, not just cash. What drives our overlords into a towering rage today is that technocrats still have power to define reality, and the technocrats keep telling them that they can't have all their heart's desires instantaneously. Elon Musk wants to live in a world of berserk ultralight conspiracism in which all of humanity looks to him for his discoveries about the truth. When a Twitter engineer explained to him that his engagement was down, not because his algorithm was broken, but because people were losing interest in Musk fired him. Trump wanted to claim that Hurricane Dorian might hit Alabama, so he just drew that on the map produced by NOAA, where Sean Parker's father had worked, and made the head of NOAA frightened he'd lose his job. Doctors want to decide what their patients need, but are losing that power to private equity. Right now, we're just at the start of what will be a titanic war between the masters of mankind and the technocrats. The masters hold most of the cards, including the fact that the technocrats largely don't understand that they're in a war and are not yet ready for it. Thus, the technocrats will likely be defeated unless they can do something they've never done before: forge an alliance with the working class. So, yeah, there you have it there from John Schwartz. Very, very interesting piece there. Love to see that. And it's a really great person to kind of understand some of the interesting dynamics in society, and just, if they can't give up anything, the masters of society, the great proprietors, as he puts it, what will happen? It's going to be a very, very interesting thing to watch. And we'll continue to do that on Newsflash. We're going to be back tomorrow, Monday, for our scheduled show. We'll see you then.